Joining us now, though, running for Congress again, is Steve Negron. Steve running for Congress as a Republican in the 2nd District of New Hampshire. Last time he ran against incumbent Ann Custer. He got no money, no support, but he did have Fred Doucette with him. He had Al behind him. He had Corey Lewandowski behind him. He had our good friend Bruce Benton behind him. But he had no money, and everybody wrote his campaign off for dead except us. And but he got 42% in the blue wave with no resources. Now, go to 2020. You got President Trump on the top of the ticket. You got, I think, Corey Lewandowski is going to be the Senate candidate right under him. Then you got Steve Negron under that. Then you got the Trump 2020 campaign pouring in millions of dollars into New Hampshire. It could be a very different story. Plus, you've got another year of Ann Custer voting with the squad crew. And Steve is joining us now. Steve, I'm telling you, there could be an upset in CD2. Your peeps are here. You got Fred Doucette. You got Bruce Benton. You got Al Letizio. They're telling me, watch this 2nd District. Negron is going to pull off the upset of upsets. Steve, good to have you back with us.
Hey, John, it's good to be back on. And good morning, Al. How are you, my friend?
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm doing well. So yeah, John, it's exciting right now. You know, all those things that you mentioned in the prelude is everything that we knew, and the fact that we had all those handicaps. You know, we look at it as a learning experience. You know, sometimes you plant seed and your harvest doesn't come until the following year. So, you know, we announced back in March. You know, we knew that fundraising was an Achilles heel for us. We've been doing that. It's going very well. We've gone out of the state to help support the campaign. So we're really excited about it. And as I said early on in March, you know, we're getting the band back together. So look out, because this is going to be really exciting.
Well, I got to tell you, your friend, one of your senior advisors, is with us, Bruce Benton, who is here, and he was so excited. Bruce is so excited about your campaign. He was telling me last night, he's like, look, he kept asking me, what time Steve coming out? What time Steve coming out? And I told him, and he said, you know, Steve's going to win this race. He says, I can feel it. I can sense it. Steve's going to pull the upset and win this race. So a lot of your people excited about this, Steve. And the difference is you're going to be running on a full ticket.
Yes, sir.
Trump, I'm convinced Lewandowski is going to run and be for Senate. You're going to be third on the ballot. And the question is, if you're voting for Trump in New Hampshire, you're certainly going to vote for Lewandowski or whoever the Senate nominee is, and you're going to vote for Steve Negron, right?
Right, and that's the way, we had, it was a tough year for all of us, even in the state. We didn't do well locally. We lost the House and the Senate and the Executive Council. Thank goodness that, Governor Sununu was able to maintain the corner offense, and so he's, just been doing the right thing for the state and vetoing some pretty bad bills that the Democrats wanted to put forward. But now that we flip the page and now we have the president at the top of the ticket, we feel it now. There's people from the re-elect Trump and in the state. We've had more people now. The president's coming back tomorrow. We never had that in the midterm. So there's just so many things that are lining up for us now, John, and it's just a great opportunity to be a good Republican in the state.
Steve, I want to get your thoughts as running for Congress. I want to get your thoughts on the president's view now on China. He has put the second round of tariffs off for a few weeks in order to, I guess, further negotiate with the Chinese. This is after he said the Chinese wouldn't negotiate with him. Do you think the president should just go forward with the tariffs?
Well, I think he's such a smart businessman. I think he's getting a pulse as to what it is. And, if he thinks that we need to throttle back a little bit right now to see if the Chinese will come to the table, I think that's a smart move. He's not one that's going to rush in and blow something up and then have to deal with the aftermath. So, he put a line in the sand. He told them about the tariffs. They're still out there. He may wait until after the holiday season, because we do, as Americans, we do consume a lot of goods from them. But I think the president's doing the right thing. They know where he's coming from, and now he's giving them time to think. And I think that's important. And look at the unrest that's happening in Hong Kong. So there's a lot of things that are happening, and I think the president's taking the right tactical move on this part.
Okay, the president also, Steve Negron, calling for two things as it relates to gun legislation, standing up to the NRA and the gun lobby. And I know there's a lot of gun owners in New Hampshire,
Right.
but the president asking for closing the loopholes for background checks, that is number one. He's also asked for a federal extension of the red flag laws, which basically there's various states that have this, some don't. But the one that's being proposed by Republicans in Virginia right now is you have a 14-day period where you can get a gun confiscated or not sell it to someone based on their history, social media, whatever. But then you have to have due process. It has to get in front of a judge. I think the president's instincts here are sound. He's looking for a way to address the gun violence that we've had. These seem to me to be common sense solutions. But you're running in a very pro-gun state. What are your thoughts on the president's gun legislation initiative, Steve Negron?
Sure. Well, when I was a state representative, the Democrats tried to put forward some red flag laws. I can tell you, John, that the Second Amendment is a right not given by man. I think those are things, and we need to be very careful. It's a slippery slope. I think there's a lot of action and activity and thought and feeling, and people are scared because of some of the situations that has happened. I used to say last time is that we always want to throw this at the feet of responsible gun owners, and without looking at the root cause. And I personally believe, and I believe that the president has already touched on this, is that what is the cause as to why somebody thinks that that's a way to deal with the situation. I personally believe that a lot of this is a mental health issue, that they believe that this is their only recourse. Look, we also had a man the other day that killed 4 people with a knife. There's not a lot of outcry about banning knives. So I'm a constitutional conservative, John. I believe in due process. I think that when you throw up the name red flags, it puts a lot of people on edge because they think that somebody's going to come and confiscate your weapon just on the basis of an accusation. So I think we need to be very careful. There's over 10,000 gun laws on the books, federal and state. In our state, we're very responsible. Our governor just vetoed 3 gun bills that the Democrats try to push through. So, we shouldn't rush out here. We should take a calculated look. But I think that responsible gun owners are the majority of the people out there in this country, and we shouldn't do something that's rash right now.
So, Steve, are you saying that if the president were to go, if he's asking the Senate to go forward and the House of Representatives to go forward with his legislative initiatives, red flag laws, and closing the loopholes for background checks, if you were in Congress and this came before you, as the president has outlined it, would you vote yay or nay?
Well, I would tell you I would have to take a hard look at it, John, and I'm not trying to circumvent the answer.
Right.
Is that we have to make sure that every citizen's Second Amendment right is protected. Anything that infringes on that, I would raise my hand and say, what's the purpose, and does this really lead to any end result that we're trying to do? So, if it's something that's out there that the president has put forward, I absolutely would have to do my due diligence on that. But a red flag law to me is a red flag to me. That somebody's trying to infringe on my Second Amendment rights, so I'd have to take a long, hard look at that.
What about closing the loopholes on background checks?
I think there's a lot of people out there that use it as a battle cry, and me as a responsible gun owner, and you look at how we do it in the state of New Hampshire, I don't believe there's loopholes that people are abusing. So a lot of times, to me, that's a scare tactic about what those loopholes are. We have, like I said, we've got 10,000 laws on the books. And a lot of these people, the question you have to ask yourself is, if in fact you want to institute new laws, is that going to stop anything or anybody from doing the kind of things that are happening? And I would tell you respectfully that some of these individuals that have used weapons and how they have gotten their weapons, that these loopholes, supposed loopholes, wouldn't have stopped those individuals. They would have gotten those guns anyway. So the issue isn't the gun, John. The issue is the individual that's using it.
We're with Steve Negron. Steve is a Republican candidate for Congress in New Hampshire. That's the 2nd District. Steve ran in 2018 during the Blue Wave. Steve got 42% of the vote against all odds. This is the 2nd Congressional District in New Hampshire. Both seats in New Hampshire are represented by Democrats, and Congressional District 2 is represented by incumbent Democrat, liberal Ann Custer, and Steve taking her on again in 2020. Steve, let's get to Hong Kong. I know you've been watching what is going on. A lot of people wondering what the Chinese are going to do. Is it going to be another Tiananmen Square? Are they going to send in troops and tanks? How will the U.S. and the United Kingdom react? If you're in Congress now, Steve, looking at the situation in Hong Kong, what would be your advice to President Trump if indeed the Chinese go forward with military action, which now some experts are saying they're likely to do because of what has gone on here with this extended protesting?
Right. That's a good point. I was just talking about that last night with some colleagues, is that, you look at the Chinese army, you see this flow of military vehicles into a stadium across the harbor to do that. I remember very well Tiananmen Square. And the issue right here is I think the president needs to understand what is happening. And the thing I think that is being missed in the media right now is that these are people that are fighting for their freedoms. These are people that are realizing that, I don't want to live in this oppressed state like this. And when you look at the Democrats right now and all 20 plus that are running on their platform for the president, and they're so far left, what you're seeing is a peek underneath the tent as to how they want our country to go with all this issue that these people like Ann Custer and Pelosi wanted to take us. So, we are a land of freedom. I heard somebody say that, we're about freedoms and not free things. And so, this country right now is based on the ability of the individual rights of freedoms of rights of individuals. And what we see in China is those are being suppressed. And so these people are saying enough, and they're uprising. And I believe that the president is keeping a careful eye on that. This is a very tenuous situation right now. It's a formidable opponent that's out there. But I think the president has got resources at his disposal, whether it's by sanctions or some other things, to make sure that the Chinese should not be oppressing their people. We know that's the regime, but it's really what those people want. They want the individual freedoms, and that's exactly what this country's for, and that's what we're running again.
So, if the Chinese do act there militarily, and there's degrees of it, obviously,
sure.
You saw the riot police yesterday at the airport clashing with protesters trying to open the airport. That's one thing. But if there is a Tiananmen Square style confrontation where, as you remember that as I do, thousands and thousands of people massacred. In fact, Steve Negron, to this day, no one knows how many people there were killed by the Chinese communists. No one knows. Some people say it could be 2,000 or 10,000. There's no accounting of it. No one knows. President Bush at the time did absolutely nothing. Right now, though, the president in an extended trade battle with China. If you were in Congress, what would be your advice to the president if indeed there is a confrontation militarily with the protesters?
Sure. Well, certainly you need to understand that China has such a large impact, not just on the United States, but in the global economy as well. And I think what the president would do, and I think he'd be smart to do, is to rally other countries to get, for lack of a better term, a coalition together, and realize and tell China, that this is not something that the global, which we are, I believe, is the leader of the global world, is something that we would stand for. I'd be very hesitant at this point to send in troops. Being a retired military and coming from a military family, we need to be very judicious with the use of the military, but we have other opportunities and other sanctions to go out there. And I think the president would realize that he has support from world leaders about that China cannot do that. It's a human rights issue, and I think that he'd be able to gather support to be able to put some really stringent things in place to bring China to the table to stop those things or risk something that would be escalated, which is not in the benefit of any country.
So what you're saying is put together an Iraq-Kuwait style
sure.
Collaboration amongst free nations, rather than the U.S. go it alone.
Absolutely. When I was in the service, John, we used to have the ability to do what was called as 2 MRCs, or 2 major regional conflicts. China would be a huge draw on the military here, and so we're tired and weary of what's happened in the desert. We've asked a lot of our men and women of the service, so we need to be very judicious and very prudent, and I think the president would go out and get a coalition of the willing to make sure that this was a significant threat, not only to the people of China, but to a global area, and I think that's what he would do.
All right, Steve, one more question. We've only got a minute. We're with Steve Negron, running for Congress, New Hampshire, Republican against Ann Custer. She's a Democrat incumbent. Steve, the president negotiating with the Taliban in order to find a way to put a coalition together to get U.S. troops out of Afghanistan. Right now, the mediator is the state of Qatar, where we have the biggest air base there. The talks are going on in Doha, and the Afghan government not really involved in it. It's basically the U.S. and the Taliban trying to find a way to get our troops out. Are you in favor of negotiating with the Taliban to get us out of there, or do you think maybe the U.S. should just have a permanent presence in Afghanistan, Steve, like we have in Japan, Germany, South Korea, etc.?
Yeah, I'm not in favor of permanent presence over there. You know, when I was growing up in Europe, you know, we had so many military bases that are a result of the Second World War. And they stayed there, and of course, then we had the base realignment and closure and taken out. So I'm not in favor of a permanent base in Afghanistan. You know, again, in this situation that I know that Afghanistan hasn't really helped necessarily with outing the Taliban from the country. So I think the president is doing some things. I would bring some other countries in, people that we know better to help us with that. I'm not a fan of negotiating with terrorists at all, but I am a fan of bringing our men and women home in every avenue we should pursue because the national security strategy states that, you know, we need to protect the men and women in the United States, and I think that's what the president is trying to do.
Steve Negron, congressional candidate, Republican, New Hampshire, District 2, running against Ann Custer, Democrat. Steve, if people want more information on your campaign, other than call and email and tweet Bruce Breton.
Right. Everybody go to Bruce. You can reach our webpage is about to go up. It's just a donate page right now. It's Negron, Negron, the number 4, Congress.com. We're excited about it. We're going to start this momentum. We're going to get in earnest. We're going to announce our campaign manager on Thursday, and people will know who this individual is. So we're really excited about it. And to you, John, thank you for everything you did to help us last time, man. We wouldn't have gotten to the 42% if it wasn't for your help.
Well, 42% was a good showing, but in 2020, we've got to get you to 50% plus 1.
Roger that.
All right. Steve Negron, running for Congress. Go to Negron, the number 4, Congress.com. He's got a shot to win. This is going to be a flip seat. It's gone Republican in the past. It's going to go Republican again. This is a great candidate. Steve's a great guy, and he's got a shot to win this race. Lewandowski, Trump coming to the state, targeting the state. You got to flip 5%. That's all it is, 5%, and you win. I think we can do that, and hopefully I can be a part of that brigade. And thank you, Steve, for being with us. Thank you for all you do. John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking the Truth across America. We'll be right back.